And we are back on the What the Funk podcast. And I'm really excited about this episode. To be honest, I feel like I say that every single time, so hopefully it doesn't get trite. But I am excited about this episode. One, we have a woman. I'd say like 10% of our podcast recordings, we have a woman. Shows you how kind of male dominated the oil and gas industry is. But nonetheless, really, really fortunate to have Rachel Collins on this podcast. Rachel is the CEO of W Energy Software, a place where I worked during COVID for about a year. I've seen some changes, and now Rachel's leading the show over there, taking the company to the next stage of its evolution. So, going to have some fun today with Rachel on the podcast, get to know her, how she ended up in oil and gas, some of the plans she has for W, some of the things that she's seeing within the oil and gas industry. So, Rachel, welcome to What the Funk.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for inviting me. These are a lot of fun. This is only I think the third podcast I've done. So thrilled to be here and really excited that I'm one of the few women that you have interviewed. So we gotta make sure we get more ladies on here. That'll be a goal of mine going forward.
Yeah, if you have some, send them my way after this. We'll definitely want some more. So, Rachel, tell me a little bit about yourself. The question that I always ask all of our guests, and the answer requires nuance, but who is Rachel Collins? Who are you?
Yeah, it's an interesting loaded question, right? That's a
I
big
know.
one. Well, right now, I would say I'm the CEO of W Energy, but at my core, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. I have two beautiful girls one is college age. She's a sophomore at LSU.
Ah,
And I have a senior in high school that she's heading to LSU here in this late summer. And then we have our caboose, a little 9-year-old boy. On the weekends, he plays every sport imaginable. So I spend my weekends like every other mom of a young boy, attending his basketball games, his football games. My husband coaches for his football and basketball games. So just kind of a normal, busy family. And I'm part of it. I've got two brothers. I'm the only girl, older brother, younger brother. I like to say I'm the favorite, but I believe I really am the favorite. And my parents just live, a couple miles down the road.
nice.
So very, very family oriented. And that's who I am. I've been in Texas for 85% of my life. So I'd say I'm a Texan, even though I wasn't born here. I still consider myself a native and, definitely a Southerner at heart.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're already finding some common ground here. So, I have 3 kids. My daughters are 13 and 11, and our caboose, my son, is 6. So I'll
Okay.
sort of be where you are in a few years with the girls going off to college, and the son loves playing sports. He just can't get enough. It's like soccer and rugby, and then he comes home and he wants to play basketball or watch sports. It's like never ending with him. And you can speak to this too. The contrast between having girls and then having a boy, like it really stood out to me. Right. They're
It's
so much different. They're all their own individual person, but the girls you could put more in sort of a box together. Like they like TikTok, they like some of the social media stuff, they listen to some of the same music. My son is just like, where did this guy come
Yeah, they're very different. When my husband and I, we decided we're going to start over in our 40s, we're like, whoa, we're having a baby here,
from? Wow.
and I have to tell you, we really wanted a boy, just to experience a boy. Having two girls,
Yeah.
we thought, hey, that'd be amazing. And so when we were waiting to find out, are we having a boy or a girl, we cheered probably a little too loudly when we found out we were having a boy because I thought, what's the alternative? That we would be sad with a girl? That's not the truth. But you're right. Like we wanted to experience the difference. And he's been amazing. We kind of laugh. There's a 9-year difference between my middle daughter and Henry. And we say that he has 3 moms. He is King
Right.
Henry. He's adored by his sisters. And so you're right. Something else completely different. And yet he's really the glue of our family. We're just trying hard not to create a narcissist and,
Yeah.
have a little bit spoiled.
It is so easy to over spoil the baby, especially when it's a boy. Like we have a gap. It's not 9 years. It's about 6, but it's enough where you've kind of created a life with your family of 4. And you're like, well,
Yeah.
I guess this is it, right? This is our family. And then, my wife was, I think, about 40 when she had Ezra. And yeah, I'd sort of resigned myself to that point of we're probably just gonna have another girl. Like, this
Yeah.
is the reality, and when she told me it was a boy, I'm like, "Come on, like, you're
Yeah.
not telling me the truth." But indeed, it's a boy, and he is absolutely spoiled. His sisters, "Oh, you're so cute," and they wanna put makeup on him and do all of the fun girl things. I mean, he gets everything. The way that you parent too, at least the
Yeah.
way I think I parent, is so much different. Like helicopter parenting, big time for the first one. The second one, relatively close in age. Okay, we sort of know what we're doing. Then the third one, it's like, have at it, kid. Just come back alive.
It's so true. It's so true. And yeah, it's fun to see though. I think also I'm just so happy to see how close they are. You worry that with an age gap, are they going to go their separate ways? And my oldest daughter, for instance, she does. She likes TikTok. She's on social media,
Yeah,
and her brother is featured in a lot of these,
cool.
recordings that she has. It's her little brother or our French bulldog. So, they find ways to connect, and it's really sweet to see their relationship as well. In fact, when she was heading off to college, she really had a hard time deciding, am I going to go all the way to LSU? It's only 5 hours away, but nonetheless, she said, I'm just afraid to be that far because I'm afraid I won't be part of Henry's life. And I was like,
Oh,
that's heartbreaking. Of course you will. You'll come home. You're not that far. But that was a big factor in her decision as to where she was going to go to school. So I think it's been really sweet to see just the age gap and the fact that it hasn't necessarily made them distanced. It's brought them closer together.
yeah, yeah. A lot of really relatable stuff. And I think you also said you're the middle child,
I
right?
am.
I am too, and you have 2 brothers. I have 2 sisters. So
Okay.
can definitely relate, I think, in some ways to where you are coming from. Take me back to sort of the beginning. So you're not born in Texas, I don't think. So where did you grow up? Like, where'd you go to school, college, all that? And let's get into some career stuff too.
Sure. It's funny. We moved around a lot, and people ask, Was your dad military?" And I said, "No, he was a school teacher of all things." But
Oh my god.
I was born in South Bend, Indiana. Both my parents are from Northern Indiana. It's crazy, and they're from very, very small towns. Big Notre Dame fans in my family. Um, my dad went to IU, and they moved us to the South when we were very young. My dad started teaching. He also was a coach. He coached high school football, high school
Mm,
basketball, and we didn't have a lot of money. My mom stayed at home. She would work part time every now and then, and we couldn't afford to go on vacation. So we'd move. My dad would just take another job in another place, and we would move.
yeah.
So I think I lived in 11, or I went to 11 schools over 12 years, and we lived in Colorado for a while. We were in then we moved south. We lived several places in South Georgia, and then we moved to Texas. Spent time in Texas, and I went to college in Louisiana. So a lot of Southern in me. And it's funny because in our family, my parents have that Northern accent. They say, "We're going to do the wash. We drink pop." They say, "You guys." And I was raised for the most part, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, where I'm like, "Hey, y'all, turn off the
Right.
light. I'm going to go, have my oil changed," and like just very different. So it's funny how my brothers and I definitely Southerners, and my parents are Yankees here.
See, but that's good for you because then you can always just put on whatever accent you need to put on depending on the person that you're talking to, right? You're dealing with somebody from Chicago or Wisconsin, you talk one way.
That's
You're
so
dealing
true.
with a hardcore Southerner, you put it on the other way. I'm a Yankee, I'm a New Hampshire kid and grew up in New England. And also my parents were teachers. So again, we have more commonality. Also wild to hear you say South Bend. The guest that we had on last week, Marty Dietrich, went to Notre Dame, huge South Bend guy. So, I've recorded 140 something episodes and nobody had been in the Notre Dame South Bend community. And now we have 2 in a row. So this
There
is
you
just the way
go.
that the world works and the way that the universe works. So you moved a lot.
Moved a
And
lot.
for me, I lived in the same house that I was born in New Hampshire, and that, to me, it's I think part of why I hesitate to move now, because my experience was just being in one place. Was that hard as a kid, kind of leaving friends and finding new groups of friends? Like the social emotional aspect, was that difficult for you? And like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was super difficult. And it's one of the reasons I'll tell you, I've been professionally headquartered in a lot of cities, but my kids have always, I mean, we've been in our house 23 years. Every one of them has come home to this house. So
Yeah.
definitely changed the way that we approached our family. But yeah, it was hard. It's funny. A lot of people don't believe me when I say this, that I'm definitely more introverted than extroverted. They're like, what? But you kind of learn that behavior. But I was the shyest kid in school. I was a
Mm.
very shy, quiet kid. And I think that, part of moving around a lot was if you don't learn to make friends and, get outside your comfort zone, then you're not going to have any. That's just something that, well, I was constantly the new kid. And so by the time you're in first, second grade, you already have, these social groups that are formed, and it's
Yeah.
really hard to penetrate that. So, and especially I moved in middle school, and those are some of the hardest and most formative times. So yeah, that was tough, but I also think that it helped me to build some of the skills that I needed that aren't necessarily natural tendencies for me.
Yeah, that's cool, and I think it's easier to reflect on that now, but I'm sure at the time, like you said, it was difficult. Did you go to the same high school at least all 4 years, or did you switch high schools too?
So my brother and I actually we went to the same high school. That was one thing my mom finally said, "Hey, enough!" Right? Like we
Yeah.
got to keep these kids here at the same high school. So we moved to a small town it's just south of Fort Worth, Texas, called Cleburne. People who've heard of it, they've heard of it. Otherwise, no one's. It's like, what is that place? But a small little cow town, and so we ended up staying there. We moved right before high school, and he and I both went our high school years there. Um, I worked at the John Deere tractor company, answered phones. Like, definitely, when I say Cowtown, I'm not kidding. Like, I think we had about 20,000 people, and it was a small little community, but a lot of fun. Great place to finally kind of grow up and plant some roots. And and yeah, so that's where I went to high school, and then shortly thereafter headed to Louisiana for my I'd say social renaissance. At the time, Cleveland, Texas, was in a dry county. We
Yep.
went to church 3 times a week. Our hometown, actually,
Wow.
oh yeah, we banned the movie Dirty Dancing. It was too risque, so they wouldn't allow it to come to the movie theater. I mean, it was like that kind of, I'm not even kidding. It was that kind of community. So, funny story about where I was deciding to go to school. I had a few academic scholarships, and so my parents took me on a road trip to check out like UT and Ole Miss, and I had no interest in LSU. And they said, "Well, we're driving through Baton Rouge, just stop and check it out."
Yeah.
And this is how old I am, Jeremy. The drinking age was still 18, and
Oh.
still 18 back then. That's how old I am. And so we stopped by. There were a couple kids from my hometown that I knew, and I went out for my first time ever. Went to my first bar, and someone there said, "Hey, do you want a shot?" And I'm not kidding. I didn't know what they were talking about. Had no
Wow.
idea. Introduced me to that, and I never went to Oxford, Mississippi to check out Ole Miss. I was like, I'm right here, and not that I have
Good
some
here.
drink problem, right? But I think that's what I needed, is that I needed like just to see a different. I needed to let loose a little bit and have like I mentioned, it's more of a social renaissance, and having fun in school. So getting an education, but also having a good time and really meeting a lot of friends. And LSU was a great experience for me. And then lo and behold, my two daughters are going to go there, and I did not push them towards it, but just beautiful people in Louisiana that they never met a stranger, and
Yeah.
so a lot of my closest friends still remain there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I've had really good experiences with anybody who goes to LSU. Like growing up in the Northeast, it's more professional sports, so you don't really have a college team that you root for unless you went to one of the bigger colleges out there, like Boston College or Syracuse or something like that. So I just sort of root for the colleges of like people that I like. where they
Yeah.
went, and I have a bunch of friends who went to LSU. So, go Tigers. I've got nothing but love for the Tigers, and it does. It seems like a really good vibe at LSU in general, and put out some good people that eventually ended up in oil and gas. What was your major?
It was statistics, or at the time, quantitative business analysis. So when I went to college, I loved mathematics and I wanted to be a math major. And my dad said, "You're never going to get a job as a math major." So he said, "Find something in the School of Business," and that was the closest thing I could find. So it was before they really had a formalized IT or MIS program, and so that was kind of the foray into that. But yeah, that was it. And then that started morphing into, we started having more computer programming courses. By the time I graduated, I had taken Power Builder and VB, Visual Basic and .NET,
Yeah.
like 1, 2.0 classes. And that ended up being how I started my career. And I loved computer programming, but my degree was actually more statistics oriented.
Yeah, which fits pretty nicely into what you're doing now. If you have experience and a passion for tech, but also like numbers, working for an ERP centric tech company makes a lot of sense. So you graduate school, you've got some sort of technical type degree. Then what'd you do?
Yeah. Uh, I did not plan my career. There are some people that were so intentional about their careers. I say mine is a little more meandering. But when I graduated, there were a lot of, big consulting companies that were recruiting. One of them at the time was Accenture. And I had the option of working in industry for what is now Kinder Morgan,
Oh,
or going to Accenture. And all my friends, everybody was going to Accenture. And I was heavily recruited by a group of alums that were at this, Kinder Morgan pipeline. And I said, I think I'm going to go there. And so I actually started my career in industry.
hmm,
Again, demonstrating how old I am. Back when we were starting to require that uh, gas transportation pipelines nominations were online. You couldn't fax them anymore. And so people were coming up with these new electronic bulletin boards. That was the thing, EBBs. And so I started my career during that time where they were building a lot of technology within gas transportation or midstream companies. And so I came to
hmm.
Houston, and that's how I started midstream.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that you had the industry background. So that took you to Houston, right? And have you been in Houston ever since?
28 years. Yes, 28 years.
Nice.
So my career has taken me different places, but we've called Houston our home base uh, from that time forward.
Nice. So you started Kinder Morgan, you're in the oil and gas industry. See, I thought of you as somebody who came from like the private equity side, right? Because there was this big changeover at W Energy Software, not to skip too far ahead. And then you end up there. I'm like, okay, well, this is a person that worked in private equity and finance and now ends up taking this role. But you had oil and gas experience. So what did you do after Kinder Morgan that eventually led you to the like finance side of things?
Well, like I said, meandering here. You could say I was fearless or dumb, but in my mid 20s, after having some experience in building software for midstream, I decided to start my own company. And so that's what
Okay.
I did, and started my own software consulting company. Kind of had a niche skill set where I was a Java developer and we were implementing a lot of middleware. So at the time it was Tibco.
Hmm.
Everybody was buying, licensing Tibco, but they didn't know what to do with it. So started working with energy companies, building out mostly trading systems.
Hmm.
So a lot of custom development, working on trading systems. I worked with Dynegy, Reliant, a lot of different companies on their trading systems. And I was independent for about 7 years, grew that business to, I mean, it was small. I was 25. So I had about a dozen people working for me, a couple million in revenue. Our largest account was in
Yeah.
Canada. So I spent about a year and a half working up in Calgary. It was a great ride. I mean, I was a hands on keyboard developer, but also being a business owner. I learned everything about, I was having to sell. I had to manage employees and contractors and projects and customers. Having customers in Canada, had to learn about international taxes. So it was just
Mm.
a great experience at that point in my life, that really kind of opened my eyes and kind of led me a little more into, I'd say, like management and the business side and not just being an individual contributor.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm sure you learned a ton, as I have. I'm 3 years into my entrepreneurial journey right now, and you mentioned taxes, like, still learning things about that, where my CPA is like, "Oh, by the way, you needed to pay these, like, unemployment taxes last year that you didn't get to." I'm like, "Great." It's never, like, a good thing when it comes to taxes, which is why you really sorta need to know about it and figure it out, but just in general, like, managing, not just the business and the clients, but the people and the personalities, right? And I think that probably positioned you nicely to run this company. So did you end up exiting? Did you end up selling that company at some point?
It's funny, Jeremy. I get that question all the time. I was about 30. People ask, "What'd you do, and why'd you wind it down?" I didn't even know about exits. I was so young. I didn't know.
Yeah.
People are like, "Hey, did you get access to capital? Did you sell it?" I was like, "I didn't know you could do that." So it took me a while to get my team hired by our customers and or get them to their contracts to run out. It took me a couple years to wind it down, but I just ended up letting the contracts run out or having customers take on my employees because that's when I started my family. I had two daughters, they're 18 months apart, and I was like, I can't do it all anymore. So that's kind of how it happened. But yeah, I wish I would have known a little more about private equity then, but I didn't.
You wouldn't be talking to me today. You'd be kicking your feet up in Cabo or something like that. But
Right? I know. If I could go back and educate myself at that point in time, but here we are.
well, that is a huge learning lesson. And my daughters are 21 and a half months apart, and I'm the dad. I think the lift on the mom at that point is so much greater. I can only imagine you were having these come to Jesus, or in my religion, as we say, come to Moses moments,
Yeah.
where you're like, what do I do? Right? I've got people, I really want to take care of them. They're smart. I've got this business. And now I got these two babies. Because let's be honest, an 18-month-old is still a baby. They still need the same level of attention that a newborn infant does. So that must have been like a challenge for you because your business is your baby. And then you have these real physical, real life babies. Um, like, how did you come to that decision of like, I've got to prioritize family? Is that just sort of like the way that you're wired? Um, like go through that process because I think it's so much different for the mom than it would be for the dad.
Well, I mean, just being a parent, I'm sure you went through this too. Like the first 31 years of my life, I thought about me, my
Yeah,
career, what I wanted, right? Where am I going with this? And as soon as I had my daughter, nothing else mattered. I didn't I didn't have to have a big career. I didn't care what happened to I mean, that was it. I felt like I kind of fulfilled my purpose here, right? And it just changed everything. And so I think that's what changed my mindset. I actually think it made me such a better people manager, a better leader. I gotta tell you, like in hindsight, I cringe to think about. I just didn't understand working parents. I was like, why can't you work late tonight? Like
totally.
we got stuff to do. I was such a jerk, and now I think having children, I realized, yeah, you have a life and you have to balance, and that's just more important. And I think in general, it just gave me the perspective I needed, looking forward to be just a better, whether I was going to be an entrepreneur, a business owner, a leader in a business, just in general gave me the perspective I needed. So I think it's hard, but I didn't want to miss out on those years too. I mean, I definitely knew women that I'd worked with that were older than me that had given up their family life for their
Yeah,
career. It was so
yeah,
binary. It was like you had to choose. And I thought, that's so antiquated. That's
yeah.
dumb. Like, I'm not going to choose. I'm going to put my family first, but I think I can still probably stay current in my, skill set and do some things that interest me. Because the truth is, I love technology. And why do I have to give that up? Makes me a better mom too. So Yeah, I mean, it was a pivotal time becoming a parent, but I think in general made me more mature, less selfish, and in the long run, probably much better leader.
Yeah, I mean, the themes that I'm hearing here are, empathy, selflessness, because everything you're saying resonates with me. When I was in my 20s and in individual contributor sales jobs, I would see the people who, like, had to leave and go pick up their kids, and I'm like, "Pathetic." You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You're never
exactly.
gonna get anywhere in your career, dude. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And God, what a loser. And, like, then I have my own kids, and truly, like, when at least for me, when I became a parent, it shifted to, like, all I really care about is my kids being happy and living a good life. It completely shifted, and you realize how selfish you were. And it's
yeah,
not your fault. It's you're here to take care of yourself, and financially you're there to support yourself. And I still have some challenges with this with business partners too who don't have kids. It's like, "No, I know you have a family." I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't though." Right? Like
yeah,
you think you do, but you don't know. A kid could come down here and say, "Hey, Julia's throwing up upstairs," and, like, I've got to pause this podcast and go take care of that, right?
yeah,
Because I'm at home. And the development of empathy, um, definitely, I'm sure, has made you a better leader, because now you manage a team of over 100 people or something like that, and a lot of them have families. I would think the level of technical acumen that most of your people need to have, they're of the age where they would have families. So at least you're able to see through the perspective of what they need to do. And what they need to do is not just work all the time. And I
yeah,
think back to, like, the leadership that I'd experienced throughout my career. The the worst leaders were the ones who didn't have empathy. The best leaders were the ones who really understood. And even if it annoyed them, they were able to put it to the side and say, you know what, take care of what matters to you. And for me as a leader, I will always make sure that family comes first for people, because at the end of the day, that's really all we're going to have at the end of this. You'll probably work at a different company besides W. I probably won't have Funk Futures forever. We're going to have our families, you know? So
yeah.
that's what we
And we're going
got.
to have the impact that we made on other people. They're going to remember us for the way that we treated them, right? And I think that's important. I really believe in just more of a progressive leadership style
Right.
where, to your point, I mean, you are empathetic. Businesses are just groups of people. It's all it is. And it's about being respectful and kind and gracious to them. And I think, when we talk about at W culture, we mean it. Like, we're not just saying that because it's popular and we talk about, no, like, we really value culture. And when you talk about your good bosses and your bad bosses, my husband and I talk about this a lot. And I've asked him, who's your favorite boss? And he said, I'm not sure I've ever really had a good boss.
Yeah.
And I said, that's sad, and I think about my daughter's entering the working force soon. And I think about, am I the kind of leader I'd want my daughters to work for?
Great
Or my
question.
or my son, not just my daughters, it's my children. And am I being helpful? Am I coaching them? Am I educating them? Am I being gracious and kind and being fair? So all of those things. I also am very careful. We're building our office here in Houston. It'll be done in September, but for now, I'm in the front of the house and I make sure I leave the door open most of the time, because if my kids hear me speaking to someone, I never want them to say, whoa, who was she talking to? That was like, I don't ever want to be ashamed of the way that I speak with people, what I
Yeah.
say to them. Like, I think that stuff's important. And so anyway, I think you just learn, you mature, and you figure out, well, it's not rocket science here. It's about the way we treat each other in the long run. To your point, we're renting everything. You're not going to take it with you. And in the end, what we're here for is really our impact on each other.
Yeah, no, very well said. I'm excited to talk about W here in a minute, but I still want to cover that gap between you becoming a mom and then what happens in the 20-ish years or whatever before you then end up
Yeah.
on the PE side and running
Yeah.
W.
Well, so ultimately, with when I kind of wound down my business, I said I want to go back to work, but I don't want to be. I can't run a business right now. Like, I don't want to have everything on me. So I ended up working with some investors,
Mm,
and just through my network, and they were Austin based, and they were running some roll up strategies. We're buying a lot of companies, And I started learning these integration playbooks and how to buy companies. And I was really more on the helping with integration. I was doing all the financial reporting. So, kind of taking a step back so that I could find a little bit of work life balance. And then I found myself running one of these companies. And we ended up getting acquired by an Austin based PE firm that was much, much larger. I don't know if you've
Mm.
ever heard of Trilogy. It also became known as ESW Capital. There were
Sure.
about 3 billion assets under management. And over the course of that business, I think they had over 300 acquisitions of software companies.
Wow.
But I kind of got folded into their portfolio as part of the growth portfolio. And I worked for a CEO named Scott Brighton. And I was there almost 7 years.
Wow.
And I learned so much. I took on 6 different acquisitions and I learned all of these playbooks and really kind of learned these PE playbooks. It was the same as the Vista playbook. And, you kind of learn the go to market playbook, you learn the integration playbooks. And
Yep.
it was a really, it was a great time in my career to learn kind of how you scale, right? I knew startups, I knew building software, and I love tech, but I didn't know how to scale a business. And
Ugh.
so that's where I learned to do that over that 7, 8 year period. So anyway, that's kind of bridging the gap. Then I went
Yeah.
on to run a strategic software company that was acquired by a public company. It was a strategic buy, and they were doing an IPO, and I just wanted to experience the IPO. That was another
Yeah.
thing. Like I didn't plan my career. I just said that sounds really fun and fascinating. Let me go do that for 3.5 years. And then I was approached about W. And so I thought,
Right.
hey, W is everything I love. It's deep
Yeah.
vertical market software. It's growth equity. I get to move fast, but also the board was very much focused on finding a leader who culture was important. They didn't want to bring in somebody that wouldn't fit in with the culture. So all these things I felt like came together. That I say that my career was meandering, and somehow it perfectly all came together where I kind of checked their boxes and they checked mine.
Well, I I love your background. You make assumptions, I think, about people based on what you read on their LinkedIn profile, right? So
Mhm.
my guess about you is, all right, like I said, this is somebody who came from the capital side, but there's just so much here and so much reflection that I'm hearing that is awesome and invaluable. And to go back a little bit to the roll up strategy, I can only imagine what that's like because yeah, I understand the roll up and integration of technology. To me, that doesn't seem as complicated as managing the humans that come into the fold because you're taking founders, right, or leaders and then having to put them in different roles. And now all of a sudden there's somebody that had a level of autonomy that doesn't, right?
Yep.
So you're learning how to incorporate new acquisitions and making these people still feel wanted versus just waiting for the clock to tick out on whatever their exit compensation is. Um, how did you deal with that mesh of personalities when you're rolling 6, 7 different companies together as part of a machine?
That was the hardest part. I mean, it always is, right? The people side is always the hardest part. But, I kind of feel like different businesses have different personalities and they have different cultures. And sometimes those things just, they don't come together. So it might look good on paper. You can have an investment thesis and you can say these companies just seem to really be complementary. This is an accretive acquisition and it's going to be great. But then culturally, there's huge conflict. And I've experienced a lot of that. So I would say that was the hardest part about the roll up strategies or just the fast, acquisitions and integrations that I experienced. Oftentimes, you would have founders or leadership teams that they thought, hey, this is going to provide capital to take us to the next level. But
Right.
oftentimes it meant you're probably not going to be around. That's the hard part, because it's a
Yeah.
different playbook. And unless you're really careful, and you're with like a founder friendly place, oftentimes it's just a different stage where they say, I need a different profile of a leader. And there can be a lot of tension. And I saw a lot of that. So what I learned is a lot of the things not to do, a lot of things I didn't want. To be honest with you, I felt that my time, some of my time in that just crazy inorganic PE world prior to now is a little bit callous towards people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot sometimes investors feel like I bought the asset, not the people.
Yep.
And so I want that software IP, but the people, they can come, take it or leave it. And that bothered me. So it's one of the things when I met the True Wind team, I was very clear. I was like, I'm getting older, and I I want to make sure that my values are aligned with the
Yeah.
investors. Like, I don't want to do that again. I'm not into squeezing a business for profit and being callous towards people. I don't want to, I value my reputation, and that's just not fun. And so I was just really fortunate to meet people that I think are like minded, who also value the people, because that is the most valuable asset. It's not the software, it's the people
That's right.
first.
That's right.
So anyway, that's kind of what I learned through all that. Learned a lot of cool playbooks and a lot of things, but I learned a lot of the things that I didn't want to emulate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that when I talked a little bit earlier about, bad bosses, I think I learned more about what not to do than what to do, just by experiencing some things that were negative for me, and
Yeah.
being, I like to consider myself a relatively, authentic, sensitive person, and I just assume that others are like that as well. So I just don't want people to have to feel the way that I felt at low points because of how a boss or a manager or a company made me feel. Um, but with W, I think W had a pretty good culture
Yeah.
when you came in. In the brief period of time that I was there, I thought that Pete, did a nice job of building a company where people wanted to work, and
Yes.
I think it was people friendly. So I think you were stepping into a place where you saw, okay, there's like good bones here, but now the company needs to take the next step and scale. And I believe when you came in, there were a few recent acquisitions, like Seven Lakes had just happened, and there was some other
Chorus.
acquisitions. Chorus had gotten rolled in, so you had this new logistics thing. Now you're branching out more into the field with some operate by exception with join and field data capture stuff, and you've got this robust portfolio of products. But now you need to turn this into like an integrated company, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about like what is the first 6 months, 12 months like as a CEO of an established player that's looking to take the next step? Like, what did you do, and what was really important for you to put in place as a leader to not fully like disrupt everything, but also keep the company on the tracks?
So I'd say here, first of all, there's no play. You can't come in and say, "This is my playbook."
Yeah,
There's no such thing. You have to really just come and learn about the business and the people. Um, and so, the first 30 days, it's just listening and learning and
yeah,
understanding what's going on here. Um, I would say, first and foremost, you mentioned it. When I came in, there had been a lot of complexity created
yeah,
in the year before I joined. So, to your point, Pete founded this business. It's the hardest thing to do, the
yep,
bravest thing to do, to found a business and create something from nothing. And he did create a very customer centric, like people oriented business. But then we talked about it, you start layering on acquisitions and you get all these different cultures coming together. And it takes some deliberate thoughtfulness to really bring that together so that we have one W. So I think when I came in, I felt it was a little bit fragmented. You kind of had
yeah,
the core W, and then you had some of these new acquisitions that felt completely independent. They hadn't really been integrated.
yeah,
Um, there was a lot of complexity because we had completely different tech stacks.
yep,
So, you got all this, a full stack developer was impossible to find because you'd have to know like every tech stack imaginable. Then also, if you tried to rationalize your customers, the Seven Lakes acquisition, they were super majors and like really up market,
yep,
and W was like really middle market,
yep,
the lower market. So there's just a lot of rationalization that needed to happen, and so that was number one. That I knew we have to rationalize this, because if we keep layering on, if we keep um, buying companies and not taking the time to make sense of what we have, we're going to run this into the ground. It's happened time and time again. I've seen it happen. So we got to take the time to figure out what we have. And then the second thing, if we want to scale, I've seen it. You often have companies that get to about that 20 to 30 million, and then they kind of hit a ceiling and have a hard time breaking through.
Yep.
To scale beyond that, pretty much it's a different way of managing, it's a different way of looking at things. So everything that you did as a venture, like a startup, hey, do whatever it takes for the customer, say yes to everything, like
Right.
put them at the
Right.
core. You can't do that. So it's teaching the team, hey, everything that you did when you were a sub $10 million business, you got to learn a new way. You got to almost do it completely opposite. And that's hard to teach
Oh my
them
god.
a new
Rachel,
playbook.
that is like for me, that like cuts to my soul, right? Because what I hear if I'm one of the people that built that business is like, you're doing it wrong. Right. And it's like, well, what do you mean? I built this company to get it to the point where it's awesome. And that's why you're even here. Right.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is, no, this is how we evolve and grow. But I
Yes.
could see people feeling like let's look at Harrison, right? Like a long tenured guy who's been a sales engineer and worked in a number of different roles. Like if I were him and I heard that, I'd be like, what do you mean I did everything wrong or I have to do things different? I've got my way and it works and I've done great here. Like, so then you're dealing with the personality side of like, well, this is how we're going to get to the next step. Like, how do you do that? Because to me, that is like I've struggled with that being on the early team side and the growth side, and then a new group coming in and saying you have to do it this way. I'm like, well, why do I have to do it that way? My way works, right?
Yeah.
What do you know? So then you're dealing with some of that. Like, how do you manage that?
It's a great question, Jeremy. I mean, some of it is the delivery. You can't say, hey, you did everything wrong, because you didn't. You didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right. You created something from nothing, and you got it to, this sizable, meaningful business that is here today that has so much value. Um, so it's not that, it's more, it's like, this is so cliche, but you know that book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There?
Yeah.
It's just saying that the next step, we can either stay where we are, we can stay where we are, and we can keep doing what we've been doing. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if we want to double or triple in size, we do have to create more process and structure and discipline. And what that means is actually we have to simplify some things. And it's
Mm.
not saying no to customers, but we have to have some guardrails, right? That's all we're saying. It's not, nothing's wrong. I just want to teach you some new things, some new ways of doing things. And as long as you've got people that are open to change, that are curious, inquisitive, they want to learn new things, then you're fine. Everything goes well. When you have instances where people are very resistant, they want to go back to the old days, that it's not going to happen, right? So that's where you get that friction sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, we were like a family. Well, yeah, because you were 15 people, but guess what? We're 150 now, and so
Yeah.
that's the hard stuff. But no one's wrong in that. It's just we're different now, and we have to embrace that, and we have to change the way that we look at ourselves, and we have to change the way we operate. And the only way you can do that is the way you communicate, and it's showing people. You can tell them, like I can talk to people all day and they can shake their heads. No,
Yeah.
that doesn't do anything. You have to show people. Let me show you what I mean by this. Let me give you an example. And let me show you the model I'm talking about. Let me give you a spreadsheet. Let me like draw what I'm talking about. And that's the hardest part, is taking the time to kind of teach the team what you mean.
It's like a bit of like business therapy in addition to like executive leadership. I think when you are incorporating a change in CEO, and there were a lot of changes, right? You go from founder led and you get one, private equity firm, and then there's another private equity group, and new leadership comes in, and it's a lot, right? And people's livelihoods are at stake. And oh my God, am I going to lose my job? It's like you're then interviewing or re-interviewing for a job that you think you kicked ass in for 8 years, and that's hard, right? So I think I like the
Yeah.
fact that you're talking about having a level of empathy and listening to what that could be like for them. because I think that's important and that's missing in leadership today a lot.
But you know what, Jeremy? I'll tell you the other thing. I've had this conversation with a few people. There's also just, hey, let's be a community of adults and let's have a mature conversation. Because
Yeah.
I had a guy work for me here at W, and when we bought Seven Lakes, a lot of our leadership roles suddenly became global because Seven Lakes, 90% of their business is in India. And these are
Yeah.
full-time employees. Like so we're a global company, even though 100% of our customers are in North America. And so I had a guy working for me and I was like, hey, you're a global executive now. And so we got to look at things differently. We've got to operate the team differently now. And so we can't have command and control.
Yeah.
We gotta have a little more progressive style, and you got to have bidirectional feedback. So we talked about some of the things that we needed to change. He said, "Let me think on this. I'll come back to you." So, okay. Came back and he said, "You know what, Rachel? I don't think I want to be a global executive."
Yeah.
And I said, "You know what? That's fair." And I said, "Thank you for being a mature adult and telling me that so that we can." I said, "And by the way, that's not going to work for us. I mean, we have a team in India and, it is what it is. But it's okay to say, I just prefer that 25-person startup company. I
Yeah.
like the chaos of it. I like the lack of structure. It's okay. But that's not where we are anymore." And so when you get the friction sometimes is when people are like, I want to do it the same way, but we're not the
Yeah.
same company.
Yeah, no, I really like that level of insight, and I wish, I don't know, I'm thinking back to some of my earlier career and even some of my time at Seven Lakes where, we it was very fast and loose and revenue grew like crazy in a short period of time, and then raised 20 million bucks, and now you have all this leadership coming in, and I my immediate, I was young and I just pushed back. I just pushed back on it. No, the way that I do it is has been great, and it probably hurt myself in the company. And what I really just should have done is say, actually, I'm kind of out of my comfort zone here. Like, I liked the chaos. Like, that's what I thrive in. And that's what I'm doing today. And it works for me. And I probably should have just had that heart to heart with saying, I don't want to be like this individual contributor. I want to be a lot of different things, right? I
Yeah.
want to do this and I want to be a podcaster and I want to be a go to market person and a relationship builder. I don't want like a small territory where I can't talk to my friends who are in Oklahoma who I have steaks with every time I go down there. That doesn't work for me. Right.
Yeah.
And those realizations it comes with time, it comes with maturity, and it comes with like open and important communication. So I'm really enjoying this conversation, Rachel. I want to shift a little bit to like what's next. Right. So let me give you my perspective on it. So I see W and where you guys play in the whole ecosystem. I think that the tech is really nice. It's strong. You've got the quorums, you've got P2s, right? You got inertia, you got some of these other players. How do you find ways to continue to differentiate from your competition? And what is the avenue and path forward for W? Is it like we're going to grow organically? We're going to do a ton of acquisitions? Without revealing all of your corporate strategies and plans, like where does W go from here now that you are kind of in this next stage of established evolution as a player in this space?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. My team says if there's anything that any way you'll describe me, it's transparent.
Yeah.
It can be overly transparent at times, but I mean, I share with our team, this is what we're doing. The reality is we are owned by investors. We
Yeah.
are going to grow. That's the expectation. So we've got to find a path to growth. Okay. And it's going to be both. It will be organic first and foremost. And then once we've earned the right for inorganic growth, we'll take a look at that. But we're not going to do it prematurely, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be bigger, right? We're trying to triple the size of the company over the next several years, but we're not going to do it recklessly. The fastest way that you can grow is with your existing customers.
It's just
So
gonna say that.
fastest way to grow. And so what we do first is we try to make sure that our existing customers are successful. And I'll tell you, we haven't gotten it right. I mean, we've had growing pains. And
Of
so
course.
what we're really doing right now is we are doubling down on how do we make sure that the customers that we have under contract, how do we make sure that we're delivering value to them? And the other
Mm.
thing we're seeing is a lot of our large customers, they're growing quickly and we have to prove to them that we can handle their growth, right? So we have to
Yeah.
prove that scale in our product. So that's just a focus on existing customers. It's a big focus of ours. How do we differentiate? You named a lot of our competitors. So I would say the biggest difference in the way that I see this business, and I've been here 18 months, is that all of the competition that I've seen, they have a lot of monolithic architectures, right? Um, so
100%.
solutions that were built 25, 30 years. And what happens is they might work, they might be stable, they might be mature, and that's great. But they're expensive and they're going to be brittle. There's not a ton of investment going into those.
Yeah.
So I think what we have is we have an opportunity to be disruptive because we have been building composable services, this microservices architecture.
Yep.
And so we're truly building a platform. What that means to us is that we have these modularized services that can integrate. And that means we can actually give the market a turnkey solution, but we can coexist with if we go up market, you're not going to rip out SAP, but we can
Right.
actually live next to SAP. We
Exactly.
can coexist in these complex ecosystems. I think that makes us very different than our competitors. And so as we build out all these complementary capabilities, we're very composable in as far as our services. I think the other thing we talk about it a lot, but we are cloud native.
Yep.
Our solutions were born in the cloud.
Oh, yeah.
And so what does that really mean? Um, it doesn't mean that we don't have technical debt. Every software company, as soon as you write code, you have technical debt. But what it actually means is we are less expensive. We can be so much more economical. And the reason is because we have been designing to take advantage of all the cloud capabilities. Whereas when you've been designed to live on prem and in a licensed on prem model, you've had to adapt your software to be hosted or
That's
be
right.
put in the cloud. But that's very expensive. And so I think we have the best of both worlds that we have a modern platform. And because we're cloud native, we can offer a more modern, scalable solution at a more economical price.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to my early days in oil and gas when I was at Bolo, Bolo was based on a Unidata database, which even in 2008 was super like, what is Uni what? What is Unidata? And I remember like the intense conversations we had with really smart technical people saying, should we look to move this to Microsoft? Should we look at a more modern stack? And part of the hesitation in doing it was, but if we do that, are we then opening this up to a competition? Since we're basically moving them to a completely new product, well, now are they going to look at some of the other competitors too? Because they're like, well, we're not on the same old thing. Why don't we look and see what else is out there? So there's risk for some of those companies that have the monolithic technologies to make that move, right?
Yeah.
There's no secret there. So I think the positioning of W is interesting because you are cloud native. And I think that a lighter footprint technology is going to appeal to the next generation in this great crew change of leaders in oil and gas. So I think you're well positioned. I think that it's going to be fun to watch the company grow. I just have one more question for you, and I want you to lean into this one. Is like, well, two questions. One, what is it like being a female leader in a male dominated industry?
Yeah. Jeremy, it's not the first time I've gotten this question, obviously. I think it's kind of a bummer that it's even a thing.
Totally.
I mean, I think what does that have to do with my skill set and capabilities? It doesn't. But at the same time, the truth is, a lot of women have had to make, I told you, like this binary choice between do I have a family, do I chase my career? So,
Sure.
what is it like? Uh, I do feel sometimes some pressure, like all eyes on me, like
Yeah.
some other women, hey, don't screw it up for us, right? So, there's a little bit of that. And there's a little bit of just, hey, I hope that by the time my daughters are in the workforce, this isn't even a thing. Like,
Me
um,
too.
I mean, I hope that I can be a role model, not just to women, but to to just the next generation. Um, my son included. So, that's part of it. But I don't know. I also, I don't really think it's that different. I think by the time you start to get to know people, that disappears. And
Yeah.
once you have intelligent conversations and you build that credibility and there's respect there, it just doesn't matter. It's just more of that split, people make assumptions and have natural perceptions and reactions when they first meet people. But I think if you can build relationships, all that goes away. And so I don't know if that answered it very well, but
No,
I don't
I
think
think
about
it
it all that much.
I think it does, and I also think Elizabeth Gerbel came on this podcast, geez, probably about 3.5 years ago, and said something that always resonated because I asked her a similar question, and she said in some ways she's viewed this as an advantage because she'll go into a business meeting where it's all men, old rich white men in the C-suite, right? And she goes in and gives a strong presentation, and then one of the executives might pull her aside and say, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. My daughter's a senior at Texas Tech right now, and I'd really like her to have an internship. And I think you're somebody that she could learn from." Right. So in some ways, it can actually be spun in the other direction. It's not just another dude coming in. You've got a differentiator, which is silly to say, and hopefully this is not the case when your daughters are in the workforce or mine are. But nonetheless, it could be spun potentially as a positive. Last question I want to ask you: what advice would you give to your younger self? And maybe it's even a question of like, what advice do you give to your daughters as they're about to go out in the world themselves? But if you're to sit down with yourself across the table at 21, 22, 25 years old, what do you tell yourself?
Yeah. I kind of said it earlier, maybe two things. Number one, you will be remembered because of the way you made people feel, right? The way that
Yeah.
you treat people. So just always keep that in mind. Don't be an a hole. Like, really
Yeah.
value your reputation. That is so important. And I think the second thing, this is really cliche, but be your authentic self. Do
Love it.
not try to be someone else. So I took this leadership course a few years ago, and it was so dumb. It said for women to try to show like their authority and gain respect, you had to sit back in your chair in a meeting and not say much to show that you had command of the room, and just silly things to. And I was like, no, you don't have to do that. That's so archaic.
Yeah.
I actually wrote down. I wrote this down for you. I read a book, and it was called Women in Power, and it said, if women are not perceived to be fully within the structure of power, surely it is power that we need to redefine, not women. Right.
Right.
So, like, just be yourself. You don't have to try to be more masculine because you're in a male dominated field. Just be who you are. Because the truth is, when we start embracing the differences in perspective and diversity, you actually elevate the thinking and, the decision making and the ideas.
Totally.
So, I think that's what I would encourage my daughters, is not to be told that there's some persona that you have to fit into in order to be successful. Just be you.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Authenticity, right? Owning your true self is fantastic. Rachel, where can people find you? Where can they find information about W Energy Software? I know you guys are a bit loud on social, but
Mhm.
websites and LinkedIn. Where can you guys be found?
Okay, we're on LinkedIn. You said it. We have a new marketing team, and we're out there. Our website is wenergysoftware.com. You can reach us through the website. We're actually building our office here in Houston.
Nice.
We will be in City Center. We'll be in the building right next to the Microsoft building, and we have several customers there. So lots of ways to get in touch with us. Um, you can guess our email addresses. So, I mean, we're very easily accessible. We believe, look, we've grown, but we're still a small company, and we still believe in talking to each other and talking to our customers. So we would love to hear from anybody who's interested in learning more.
Well, that's great. Rachel, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your time. I'm sure you're getting blown up all over the place. You gave me a full hour, so I'm appreciative of that. And I'm looking forward to listening to this one. But Rachel Collins, W Energy Software, thank you.